Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of the Ostrich Technique podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ananth.
And I am your other host, Chris.
Chris, how's it going? This one, I don't know what you thought about coming into this episode, but I was maybe not looking forward to this movie as much.
Yeah, it is consistently in the bottom, quite literally bottom 3, bottom 2,
Yeah.
maybe bottom 1 of my MCU list. So I was not very excited to go into this rewatch.
Yeah, I think this movie, I would agree with you. I think this movie, which will not bear the lead, this is Thor: The Dark World we're talking about. This is the second Thor movie, is not something that I look back on with fond memories, but I won't say that I look back on it with bad memories either. I don't think I dislike this movie. It's just sort of there, you know? I think the one thing that ran through my mind that I was thinking of with this movie was I can see why Chris Hemsworth and all the other actors were very bored with the franchise after this movie. Because you felt it. You felt everyone was really bored being here. Like, just really sort of like dull dialogue, nothing really interesting. It's like so generic. Yeah. What a movie.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Well, I mean, did you have anything else to add there, Chris?
No, not really. I think you kind of covered it. It's
Yeah. Well, that's the podcast, guys. Thanks for listening. I mean,
thank you.
That's all. Yeah, thanks at all. But no, I know we'll do our standard sort of 3-act breakdown. But yeah, geez, this one, I was struggling to think. I mean, when I'm watching these movies, like, I guess a little bit behind the scenes on the thought process here. I don't know about you, Chris, but I do think of, like, things to talk about when we're actually like watching this. And this one, I was struggling. I was struggling about what to talk about with this one, or to think about what to talk about, I guess.
I don't know. Yeah, we can, maybe we'll be a little bit quicker, less to talk about.
Maybe
so we'll see.
We have a bad tendency of running over our standard hour length. Who knows? Maybe this will actually be a shorter episode for once. But let's just dive right into it, Chris. Why don't you give us our standard breakdown of synopsis, plot, all that stuff?
Sure. So this is Thor: The Dark World, a 2013 entry into the MCU in Phase 2. It is directed by Alan Taylor. It stars Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston. And it is about when the Dark Elves attempt to plunge the universe into darkness, Thor must embark on a perilous and personal journey that will reunite him with Dr. Jane Foster.
Okay. That, I have to say that plot synopsis is far more interesting than the one that they have on Disney Plus. I don't know if you noticed this plot synopsis when you opened the movie up.
Did not.
It is maybe the most generic plot synopsis I think I have ever seen. I'm actually going to pull it up right now just so our listeners get a sense of how generic this synopsis is. So that, I mean, keep Chris's in mind, the one that he just read for you. This is the one that's on Disney Plus. Thor must set out on his most dangerous and personal journey yet. That can literally describe every Thor movie. You can replace Thor with any character. That can literally describe any single superhero movie.
They're really, the writers for that plot synopsis on Disney Plus were really cooking.
Yeah, I mean, they knew what they were doing. They know how to draw in an audience, Chris. I mean, the MCU didn't become what it is today without the might of Thor 2.
Yes.
Yeah, but let's just dive right into it. I mean, one thing I do want to say before the movie actually starts, this movie does start with something interesting, which I'm sure you noticed it, or I don't know if you remember it, but this is the first time that we actually get a proper Marvel Studios fanfare.
Yes.
Yeah, for the MCU. Before, it was that sort of standard comic book flipping that they have for every other Marvel movie, MCU or otherwise, but at the end, obviously, it would always say Marvel Studios. But this is the first time they actually had a Marvel Studios fanfare. I mean, what do you think about this one, I guess, compared to the original intro and then what we have now, the sort of standard Michael Giacchino one? Because this one was composed by Brian Tyler, I believe, the one who did the score for Thor 2.
It's unfortunate that this is the first movie for this to have, the fanfare is all I will say.
I mean, that's true, but I mean, by itself as a fanfare, what do you think of the fanfare?
I think it's fine.
Fine.
Yeah. I mean, do you like the current one that we have, or do you like
You
this
know,
one? I guess.
I it's interesting because I do like the current one that we have, but I do think that it's a bit, as we've had it now for quite a while, I do think it's a bit overindulgent, like it sort of sits with all of the characters for too long and like I don't know. I feel like this one was like it's short. It's like a little bit. I mean, you dwell on the logo for a little bit, but it's like it gets to the point, and I kind of like that. I kind of like that it's a little bit shorter,
Sure.
And the fanfare is fine. And like musically, it sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's kind of a shame that this was the first movie that they
Yeah.
decided to do this with, rather than say Iron Man 3, which is interesting because they also did this with the current one where they didn't debut it with say Civil War. They debuted it with Doctor Strange, I believe.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. The current one that they have where like all of like the flashing characters. Yeah, they debuted that one with Doctor Strange, I believe, but we'll obviously get to that. But it's interesting that they never seem to time it well with like the first movie
Yeah.
of each phase.
Yeah, they probably just like, oh, let's do a new one. Oh, here's the movie that's coming out with it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, that was just, I thought that was something interesting that I picked up on. But yeah, I guess we can actually jump into the movie now.
yep.
And obviously, we start off with this whole sort of like backstory sequence about the Ether and the Dark Elves and how Bor fought them back. I mean, what did you think of the whole opening sequence?
I mean, I like that they have a little flashback sequence like that.
Mhm.
You know, I it was cool to see like a little. I mean, again, it's like a CGI war, whatever. And it reminded me a lot of like the Hobbit movies, but I I like that they had this sort of not. I wouldn't call it prehistoric, but much older flashback.
Yeah.
And setting up. Oh, there's this sort of rivalry between these two, I guess, races, and clearly setting up the ether. I don't know. I didn't think there was anything awful about it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's a pretty nondescript opening. I think it sort of sets the stage for what we needed to know. You mentioned the CG, like it's sort of like a big CG fest. I actually didn't have a problem with the CG for most of this movie. I was surprised by that. Like it's fine. Like there wasn't anything that stood out to me as like being blatantly bad. Like there's some sequences here and there that maybe don't look as good, but like I mean nothing like say Quantum Mania bad, where
Yeah,
like it's like oh boy.
yeah. And then CG doesn't really become a huge Marvel issue until probably like Phase 3, anyway. So
Phase 3. Oh, interesting. I would have not.
right,
I thought you would have said Phase 4. I mean, what are you thinking of in Phase 3 that had CG problems?
Act 3 of Black Panther.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's fair. Fair point. Okay. No, well noted, and I agree with you there. But yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I don't think really there were major CG problems with
Mhm.
Marvel, but I think also, a lot of things have to do with that. It's not just Marvel sort of pushing CG artists to like do a bajillion shots at any given time, but also the fact that there probably wasn't as many movies requiring as much CG as they do nowadays too.
Yep.
So, yeah. So it's yeah. I mean, the CG was what it was. I mean, after we get the whole backstory sequence, or like the flashback, I guess, with Bor and Malekith, we do jump to present day, and we do get to see Loki being brought back to Asgard right after the Battle of New York. And I don't know about you, I did like that we sort of tied that in directly from the end of the Avengers. I mean, I'm sure everyone wanted to know what happened to Loki after, so I'm glad they don't leave that unresolved.
Yeah, I like that it literally directly follows that he's even in the same outfit as he was in the Avengers. So I like what you mentioned. They don't leave it unresolved. You find really like what happens right away.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't know about you also, but like in the dialogue between Loki and Odin, you can already tell that Anthony Hopkins was like way less interested in this one. Like he has so much less sort of like oomph behind all of his dialogue in this one, unlike in the first one, where like you could really feel the weight of everything that he was saying. I don't know if you got that same sense, but it was something that I noticed, or I felt at least.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you just were able to sense more of how these actors were just so bored in their roles than
Yeah,
I perceive. So
definitely.
yeah,
I will say all actors, maybe except Tom Hiddleston. Tom Hiddleston's the
Oh
only
yeah.
one that seemed to be having any fun in this movie whatsoever.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the other thing also, I mean, I guess this is a general theme throughout the movie, or not a theme, but like a general thing throughout the movie, is that this is the last Thor movie that we get with like that sort of old
Yeah.
English dialogue, like that sort of old English speak that
Hmm.
we had in the first Thor movie before we got like the more conversational bro Thor from, Ragnarok onwards. I mean, what did you think about that? I mean,
It was necessary, and I think it's that sort of speak is a big part of why they wanted to reinvent the character,
yeah.
because it was not very interesting to say the broader audience, but also, like we said, for the actors, they probably found it becoming very stale. So I'm happy they switched it up, but then obviously with Thor 4, I feel like they kind of went just too overboard, and they need to kind of pull it back a little bit and kind of get a good balance between this sort of old English and
Hmm.
more of the relaxed Thor, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting way to put it. I think you know, it makes sense the reason that they shifted to in Thor 3. I mean, it's a completely different change in tone and approach to Thor as a character, which worked for Thor Ragnarok, of course, but I think I mean, it's interesting because I do kind of miss the old speak like that. You do kind of associate like the character of Thor like someone that's like sort of regal and like that with that sort of old English speaking style. So I do kind of miss it, but like I don't know, I don't miss again just the sort of boring way that all of the dialogue was delivered in this movie. Like everyone is just so stoic for the most part that there
Hmm.
really isn't any emotion. And I don't know about you, but like whenever any character had like an emotional moment, it was like, oh, where did this come from? Kind of almost like it was it there were really points of surprise for me. Like they were so out of tone with the rest of the movie where everyone was so serious and like just almost monotone, really. But yeah, I mean, you guys are going to hear this is the general theme of the movie that we felt is just like very uninterested everyone was. But yeah, so we get all of the stuff on Asgard, but then we jump back to Earth. We're dealing with Jane and Darcy, and for some reason, we're dealing with Ian, who I don't know about you, Chris. I never understood what Ian's purpose was other than comedic effect.
Oh, you mean in terms of the film versus like what his character does for
Yeah,
Darcy?
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, the film.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's comedic effect.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
mean,
he's comedic
yeah,
effect. I mean, it really is typified by the fact that like it's really characterized entirely in the beginning by the fact that she keeps mentioning calling him the intern rather
intern.
his name Ian,
Hmm.
which like I don't know about you, Chris. I could probably bet $1 that you did not remember
No,
his name
I did not.
before rewatching this movie.
I didn't even remember it since I last watched it. So,
Yeah,
like
you know.
in preparation, yeah, I remembered it maybe a few days after watching it, and then I forgot until you just said his name.
Oh well, there you go. See, yeah. I mean, I guess for context, viewer or listeners, I've rewatched this movie like quite recently. So
Minutes.
I mean, don't be spoiling all my secrets there, Chris. But I've yeah, it's very fresh in my mind all the details of this movie. The other bit that was interesting also is like, you had all of the Earth based characters. You had Jane Darcy, and then Eric was the third one. But in this one, they made Eric go insane, like literally going around naked at Stonehenge, doing
Yeah.
some stuff for the convert. I mean, like, I understand whatever they said that, oh, his no pants helps him think, but like, why did he have to be like, why did they make him go crazy? I don't know if I fully understood that.
I mean, I didn't he explain that like that Loki being in his head for so long kind of messed with his mind a
I
bit.
mean, yeah, but like to that extent, like I mean, he was also in Hawkeye's mind. He was also in like a bunch of. I mean, I guess Hawkeye's the only other major character that we've seen
Yeah.
dealing with it. But I don't know. I don't know if I fully bought that reason as like a god being in your mind for that long makes you want to go streaking at Stonehenge.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Loki showed him some things through the Mind Stone, and the Tesseract, I think showed Selvig some things as well while under Loki's influence. But I don't know. I just chalk it up to, hey, there's been external influences in his mind,
Hmm.
and kind of just Yeah, made him go crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, then of course, after all of the we get our introductions to the Earth-based characters, so Jane and Darcy, we get the fact that they stumble onto this like area which has some weird physics going on, and through all of that, Jane somehow is randomly brought to the MacGuffin of the movie, which is of course the ether, which ends up reawakening Malekith and all of that stuff, and that brings Thor to her. I mean, I guess we haven't really talked about the ether either, obviously from the beginning of the movie. I mean, what are your thoughts on the ether overall? Because I mean,
Yeah.
it's so nondescript.
It is, yeah. Like, it is the most weird and mysterious Infinity Stone in the MCU, at least from my point of view. Like,
Yeah.
it's a fluid. It's not even a stone. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like literally the next time that we see it outside of this movie, it is solidified as a stone.
Yep.
So, or I guess we see it in like a flashback in like or whatever in a vision in Age of
Mm-hmm.
Ultron, but I'm not counting that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's very nondescript. Of like, I don't know. They say it's this, it's this sort of power, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
we never really learn what it does other than it spreads darkness to all the
Yeah,
realms.
I guess it like it turns like matter into dark matter, which I was like, okay, I guess that bends reality. I don't know. For it being the reality stone,
Not
uh,
as tied to
exactly,
being a reality stone like the rest of the stones are, right? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, like the fact that its power, the ether's power, is shown better in Infinity War. Like it's actually, shaping or reshaping reality. And this movie, it's literally just seems like a power source, like
Yeah.
an organic power source. So
Yeah.
I was not a huge fan of how they displayed or show this interpretation of the Reality Stone.
Yeah. It was definitely a choice. It was not the right choice in my opinion. I mean, how would you maybe change it, Chris? Like what would you maybe do to make it work better? I know that I'm putting you on the spot here, but do you have any ideas of what you would maybe do to make it better?
Um, as in like I would still have to keep the ether as the Reality Stone
Yes.
in this movie. One, I probably would not make it a fluid.
Yeah.
I would probably make it a solid. Now, what would it be? Whether it's like something like some sort of thing like the Tesseract or like literally just a stone. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I think it would have worked better as an actual stone. I don't mind that it was like sort of a symbiosis sort of thing.
Right.
I wouldn't mind if it was like a stone, but it would, kind of like the Mind Stone would just heavily influence its user,
Mm-hmm.
or even like it kind of was doing to James, like essentially just killing her or poisoning her.
Right.
I'm fine with that, but kind of like the One Ring, I would not mind that, where the One Ring is, slowly influences you, and things like that. I just
Hmm.
I just don't like that it's a liquid thing.
Yeah, the One Ring, I guess comparison is interesting. They could have it be, you know, I'm just thinking. This is literally off the top of my head right now. This is not planned, but I was thinking that sort of sparked an idea where maybe the Reality Stone is what like attracts Jane to that sort of abandoned
Hmm.
warehouse or something in the beginning, and that is what like she thinks is like sort of the source of all of it, and her holding on to it like makes her go crazy, kind of like the One Ring,
Yeah,
and that could sort of be, maybe she could be the villain, and that would be maybe more interesting. I don't know, until Malekith comes in and takes it from her, and the Reality Stone is sort of acting as making Jane act as almost like a surrogate villain in a way.
yeah,
Yeah, hire me, Marvel. I'll make your movie more interesting. But I guess it's what, this came out in 2013, right? So we're
yeah,
11 years too late.
yeah.
But yeah, it's I think the ether could have definitely stood to be better. Of course, it is basically just a plot driving device. It basically is the reason that Thor comes down to Earth. It's the reason that Jane is brought up to Asgard. It's the reason that the Dark Elves attack Asgard. Like it's just really a device that drives the plot forward. It is truly a MacGuffin. It is like the stereotypical, like what you think of as a MacGuffin
Hmm.
in these movies, like just driving the plot forward. One thing that is interesting, though, is you kind of alluded to this, is like the energy within Jane. They show like they're saying like, oh, the energies within her, it can't be contained when she's being scanned in Asgard. Of course, she's brought to Asgard by Thor. And I was thinking about this. Do you think that the ether was what caused her cancer that comes up in Thor 4?
That is, I have not thought about that, but I like that theory. I like that.
Yeah. See, why didn't you? I mean, Marvel could have also put that in Thor 4, but they didn't think to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just something that I thought was interesting because they mentioned, that much energy coursing within you, and she is immortal after all. So
yeah,
could have mutated her cells, caused the cancer. But
another one for a month, trying to pitch himself as a Marvel writer.
I would make some choices. I mean, I'd probably be like Iman Vellani, like just pitching my choices into like an unreceptive Kevin Feige. Except Iman Vellani's actually in Marvel, and I'm sitting here at a mic at my desk talking about it. But man can dream.
Yep.
But we have obviously a lot of the rest of Act 1 is really Jane and Thor on Asgard. We get a little bit more of Thor and Jane, sort of their romance rekindling. I know we talked about this in the Thor review, but I still really don't buy into the romance between him and Jane.
The chemistry is just not there.
It really isn't. Yeah, the only scene of Thor and Jane, if you can call it that has chemistry, is that second post-credit scene, which is sort of jumping the gun. But the only reason it has chemistry is because it's not even Natalie Portman; it's his wife, Elsa Pataki, playing Jane Foster in that scene. But yeah, there's just no chemistry between them whatsoever. I mean, they're both very gifted actors, but they clearly just don't have chemistry. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the writing. I don't know if it's the way that it's portrayed. I will say, though, at least by Thor 4, I did buy more into their relationship, the way that Taika portrayed it in Thor 4.
I agree.
But, that is many, many years away from where we are right now.
Yes.
And of course, the end of Act 1 really ends with the whole fight scene in Asgard. Of course,
Dark elves.
Ether being in Jane attracts the Dark Elves. They come there and, they have this big fight. And I don't know about you, but also another thing with Asgard, which I noticed, which is different from the first movie, is that a lot of that sort of Shakespearean drama and the regality and the charm of that first movie really, it was all just not there. It was just so bland, and it just became like very generic action in Asgard. I don't know about you. It's like, I mean, it's like it's almost like Harry Potter in a way, where like Hogwarts is really crafted as this like really charming and beautiful world for all the wizards. But at least all the directors sort of kept that charm. Like there was always an allure about Hogwarts versus in this one, I think there was almost a demystifying of Asgard, even though they didn't really explain much. It just didn't feel as like sort of magical as it did in the first movie.
That's
I don't know
fair.
about you.
That's fair. I mean, I think Alan Taylor had directed some episodes of Game of Thrones and really wanted to bring in more of that Nordic sort of influence or vibes to Asgard.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, with Game of Thrones, it is very, I don't know, I'd say more bleak in its color scheme.
Definitely.
And so, yeah, like that regality of like the golds and the shiny color and all of that we see in Thor 1. It might have been a stylistic choice to tone it down, but that would be my guess. But yeah, it's a fair point what you make.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also a fair point. The color tone of this movie just being so different from first Thor. And I think a lot of that also has to do, I know we talked about this in Thor, I believe that was actually the last film that was shot on film versus the rest, I think from Cap 1 onwards, were shot in digital. And you can really feel like the sort of, they just haven't done really anything interesting visually with the digital image. And that's not to say that all digital images aren't interesting. Like there's some movies that are shot in digital which can be really, really interesting, like Dune Part 2, which is in theaters now. But
I would say Eternals.
Eternals,
one of the saving graces of that movie is the visuals like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even the Guardians movies are all shot in digital, and those are so visually interesting because James Gunn and his cinematographer know what to do with the actual
Mm-hmm.
picture. Like, just the colors are so vibrant. It's so much more interesting to look at than sort of the gray sludge that we've now unfortunately come to associate with most of Marvel movies, at least
Mm-hmm.
since they switched over to digital. But yeah, I mean, really, Act One ends with Frigga's death, and I don't know about you, but I remember this is like sort of like the most important bit of this movie and maybe the most impactful. But when I rewatched it, her death was strangely anticlimactic to me. I don't know about you.
Well, she just gets stabbed, right?
Stabbed. Yeah, she just gets stabbed. Like, there wasn't like, they didn't really dwell on it too much, which like is a choice, but like it felt a lot more anticlimactic this time around. I remember it being much more like,
It,
oh man, they killed her in when I first saw it.
yeah, I mean, her character up until this point really, isn't much,
Mm-hmm.
but they want, at least it seemed like they wanted you to feel like this was a very important death because of her being Thor's mother, but also really the connection Loki has to his family is really to his mother. So
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with you. I mean, I didn't really feel like, oh, this is the most anticlimactic thing because I didn't initially think like, oh, this was like a huge deal when I first saw it. But
Mm-hmm.
I can agree with you that from your perspective, it's like it should have been, it should have felt way more emotional or just a bigger death than it really was. Just getting stabbed and
Yeah.
then dying.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it just could have, there could have been much more to it. And Marvel has done a good job with their death scenes overall. Like, whenever a character actually does die, it's the Marvel fake death universe. People die 50 bajillion times, and Loki's a very clear example of that in this movie too. But yeah, so it's really interesting that her death was so, like, there wasn't that much fanfare about it in the movie, other than of course the funeral scene, which is really
Hmm.
the start of Act Two, which we'll, I guess, get to. But yeah, it was just a bit of a shame. I don't know. It's yeah, everything in this movie just is just underwhelming.
Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, I guess that is the end of Act One. Chris, I believe we are doing trivia now at the end of Act One, and I
that
believe it is
we
my
are.
turn.
That is correct.
Oh boy.
So,
Okay.
are you ready, Ananth, for Thor 2 trivia?
I mean, I don't know what trivia you could have possibly come up with for this one, but good luck. Good luck there. I do not envy your position having to come up with 5 trivia questions for this
I,
movie.
I think you will get some of these right. So,
Oh, well, I mean, I hope I get some of these right.
yeah.
Let's see.
All right. First question.
Mm-hmm.
Which future comic book movie director initially signed on to direct before departing due to creative differences?
Oh, I know this one. This one
Hmm.
was Patty Jenkins. She was originally going to do this one.
Correct. And I completely forgot about this. And then when I was, reading up to find some trivia, I was like, oh, I remember this was a huge deal, and Natalie Portman was not happy.
She wasn't happy that Patty Jenkins left.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Like
yeah,
she
that makes
wanted,
sense.
she wanted Patty Jenkins to direct, and then, clearly the studio interfered with whatever vision they had for the movie.
Yeah, I'm curious how that would have turned out, cuz obviously Wonder Woman was really good, but then
No,
when she took full control in 84, that was not so
yeah.
good.
Yeah, I would
But
agree.
yeah, I don't know. I'm still curious how that would have turned out.
Yep. All right, 1 for 1.
Mhm.
Question 2. Which 2 Doctor Strange actors were in the running for a villain role but did not end up being casted?
Sorry, say that again?
Which 2 actors from the first Doctor Strange movie
Okay.
were in the running for a villain role in this movie but did
Oh.
not end up being casted?
And you want me to name both of those actors?
Correct. I'll give you half a point if you get one each. Or for each one you get half a point.
Okay. Okay. Hmm. I'm gonna say, what's his name? The guy who played Caecilius. What's his name?
I'm gonna need a name.
What's the guy? The actor that played his name. The actor that played him. Mads Mikkelsen. Was Mads Mikkelsen one of them?
Correct?
Okay. Um. And I'm gonna just guess Tilda Swinton as the second one.
That is incorrect. So the
Darn.
2 actors, you were correct. The lead villain in Mads Mikkelsen
Mm-hmm.
and the other was the lead actor, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh wow, he was going to play a villain.
Yes, but he allegedly declined or removed himself from the running because he thought there would be a beefier sort of role for him down the line in Marvel, which turned out to be true.
Right, he was. Yeah, right, he
Yeah.
was indeed.
All right. Question 3. Thor defeats a rock-like creature at the beginning of the film. What is the name of that species?
Oh my god. I sort of knew that this one was coming, and I thought I was going to look up the name of the species, but I cannot remember the name of the species at all. God, what is the name of them? The rock. I mean, I know Korg is another one of them as well. God, I know this somewhere. Oh, I think I remember. It's Cronins. They're Cronins.
And you're smelling what the rock is cooking, because that is correct.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm surprised you were able to dig that out after you seemed like you weren't gonna be able to find that.
Yeah,
So
I
anyway,
pulled it out of my bag of tricks.
yes. All right. Question 4. What? And you should get this one. What DCEU lead actor appears in this film?
Oh, I Zachary Levi. I was every time I saw him as Fandral, I could just think of him as Shazam.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't bad in this movie though. I will say he was pretty good as Fandral.
Yeah, and I was like reading up that when reading some stuff up for the first Thor movie, he was originally casted as Fandral, but then had to drop out. And so
interesting. I actually didn't know that he was cast in the first movie.
Yeah, and then he finally was able to get this role, and Feige promised him, hey, like the Warriors 3 gonna have, a more substantial role in this film, and Zachary Levi felt a little bit misled on that one.
Yeah, I mean, they did have a more substantial role in this movie. I mean, we'll talk about it in Act 2, but I did like that they had something more to do here rather than just popping up like in the first fight scene in the first Thor and then just like coming to help rescue Thor in the end of the first one. Yeah, but I don't know. I also don't know if I want to take Zach Levi's where he seems to just have a big mouth about some of these things.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right. The final question.
Mm-hmm.
What did Marvel do at San Diego Comic-Con as a surprise to promote this film?
As a surprise? I mean, isn't this the one where Tom Hiddleston comes out and like screams, say my name," or was that before the Avengers one?
You tell me. Is that your guess, or do you think it's something else?
I'm gonna say it was after. I'm gonna say it's the Loki "say my name" for this one. Yes,
that is correct.
Yeah, I
Tom
knew it.
Tom Hiddleston going out full Loki gear, essentially cosplaying as his character.
Yes.
Quite honestly, maybe one of the most epic things to happen at Hall H.
Definitely. I mean, I would argue one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic moments in Hall H. Definitely. Yeah. But I'm guessing that was a good round for me, Chris.
Yeah, it was solid. 4.5 out of 5.
Let's go. Yeah, I'm very pleased with that round.
Well, I will be on the spot next episode.
Yes,
next Winter Soldier, right?
Oh man, yeah.
Is it Winter Soldier?
I could do. Yeah, it is Winter Soldier. I think, which is, I mean, I think it's both of one of our favorite movies in the MCU. But
but it would have been better for you to be quizzed because that is like a top movie for you. Yeah,
I mean that is like I think top 3 MCU for me. So, oh man, but it's okay. I'll cook up some good questions for you.
All right.
But I guess we can jump now into Act 2. We sort of hinted at what Act 2 starts off with, which is, of course, Frigga's funeral, which I guess that is more of the fanfare that we were looking for. It's a nice funeral. She gets her Vikings funeral, really, with the fire arrow and stuff.
Yep.
I mean, that's all I really have to say about it. It's just a pretty scene. It's nice. But like, again, everyone, it's just lacking like emotional depth to it. Like everyone is just so stoic. Like you would think that like at a funeral you'd want to see someone cry, but like no, it's everyone is so serious. Like Sif is so serious, Thor is serious, Odin obviously is like Mr. Stoic the entire movie. Like he doesn't show any emotion whatsoever. Yeah, but that's all I really got to say about the funeral. Like everything about Frigga's funeral was just like a bit everything about Frigga's death and funeral was just a bit underwhelming.
Yeah,
The
fair.
only person that actually really shows any emotion is Loki.
Loki,
Because when
yeah.
he's told about it, he like bursts all of the stuff around him and he's like clearly very upset. And you see that again later when they break him out. Like he's actually really torn up about it.
Yeah, and honestly, let's just get to that point. They break him out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they do break him out. Because they realize that the only way, and it's actually not a bad plan. Like I know Thor tries to explain to Odin, like we draw Malekith away from Asgard, so he won't attack Asgard. And for some reason, Odin's just kind of a dick. He's just like I don't know. He seems so different in this movie than he does in Thor 1 because he's like so much more aggressive. He's like willing to fight Malekith, like he's saying down to the last drop of Asgardian blood, which is like so
Old
different from
habits die hard.
yeah, I mean, we do learn that it is an old habit, but like it seems so different from the first Thor. I don't know. It just felt very, very jarring almost, rather than someone that wants to maintain the peace.
You
Um,
maintain the peace by, destroying your opponents.
yeah, but like, I mean, even in those other in like the past where we think about it, he was like literally invading other places, doing that with Hela, where like he
Mhm.
would go to like you would think that if he was so aggressive, he would just go to Svartalheim and
Mhm.
take out Malekith, but no, he wants for some reason Malekith to basically destroy I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre. I don't understand Odin in this movie, and I guess that's why Anthony Hopkins was not so pleased with this movie either.
Mm.
But yeah, it's just everyone just seems so out of character, so bored. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, we can now get to the whole Loki breaking out thing because that's part of the thing. In order to escape
Yeah.
Asgard, Bifrost is shut down. The only person somehow that knows how to escape Asgard is Loki, which is why
Yeah.
they break him out. And this is really, I mean, this is this. I guess I say shot in the arm, but this is really more like just a splash in the face. Really, like it's just a little bit of energy in this movie that just has really no energy in it whatsoever.
The cameo.
Yes, we did get a cameo. That's true. And I will say, when they had the cameo, I don't know if you noticed this, but they actually played the Cap music from Cap 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they played that little Cap theme, which I remember I didn't. I mean, this is really only the second time I've seen this movie. I only saw this in theaters. I don't know about you, Chris, but like,
Yeah.
obviously, when that came out, that was really the only moment that I remember getting any cheers in the movie theater. So I did not hear the Cap music when I remember seeing it in theaters, but there's a nice little touch. I'm glad that they brought that little theme back from the first Cap. But yeah, again, but that was like that's like the one part of the movie that like everyone really remembers when Loki becomes Cap, which is like just goes to show you the lack of memorable moments this movie had.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and again, I mean, we talked about this, but I do also like the fact that the Warriors 3 had a part to play in
The escape.
in them escaping, and I also think it's kind of cute that like all of them are like trying to protect Thor when like Loki's leaving is like if you do anything to harm Thor, I'll kill you, and like Loki picks up on it. I don't know, I really like that little sort of bit there.
Yeah. I mean, it was comedic as well, obviously.
Yeah,
How every single one of them. But yeah. I don't know. It shows their loyalty to Thor and their friendship to Thor, which really otherwise I feel like I don't know.
We haven't really seen otherwise, so
yeah. I mean, I guess when they in the first Thor when they come to Earth, they're like they find him, but like yeah,
I mean, but that's really it. Yeah, we don't really see. I mean, the Warriors 3 were very, very underutilized in the Thor
all
movies.
The MCU, yeah. Well, just all the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, they're really only in these two movies. They basically just get killed off right away in the third one. So, yeah. So of course they do escape, and I will say I chuckled when they land in Svartalheim, and then Loki says "Tada." Like I don't know what that ADR was, but that was just really bad ADR when he says "Tada." Yeah, and right before the act ends. I think maybe the most interesting conversation in the entire movie, like where you actually felt like they cared, was the conversation where Thor and Loki were kind of dealing with the grief of losing Frigga, and they were talking about how neither of them could really save them.
Mhm.
And I don't know about you, that was easily the most interesting moment of the entire movie for me, where you actually see like real character relations between them, which and why you actually care about Thor and Loki's relationship.
Mhm. I agree.
Yeah, but I mean, that's really Act Two. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to talk about in Act Two. It's pretty uninteresting.
Yeah, it's literally just really the escape.
Yeah,
It's all Act Two for the most part.
yeah, it really is just the escape. But there is one thing now that was in Act Two that we didn't discuss, which is the Stan Lee cameo.
Oh, the segue.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. We're working on it. 8 episodes in, we're finally going to get in our. So we're going to try and work on these segues. But the Stan Lee cameo, of course, is Stan Lee at what looked like either the mental institution or the police facility where he's with Eric Selvig, and he's asking for his shoe back. So, Chris, where does this rank for you?
I like this one. I don't know my rankings off the top of my head, but I would put it somewhere towards the top. Honestly,
Towards the
like
top.
it was a fun one. It was a funny one.
Mhm.
I liked it. So I mean, do you have up the
I do. I do have your
what is my
rankings up.
what is my number one right now?
So it's Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and Iron Man 3 are literally 1, 2, and 3 for you.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, I'm gonna put this number one for right now.
Oh, wow. High praise. The only thing that Thor 2 got right was that they got a good Stan Lee cameo for you. You know, I am inclined to agree. I think that this is the best Stan Lee cameo that we have had so far. So for me now, that puts Thor 2 as number one. It puts Thor as number two. And then his cameo in Cap 1 is number three for me. But yeah, that is interesting that we both feel that this one is his best one so far.
Yeah,
But it was a nice little comedic moment. Like I think they were starting to finally get their groove of like Stan Lee cameos
yeah,
within Phase 2. So yeah, good cameo overall. And with that, I guess we can jump into an even more straightforward Act 3. Basically, it's just basically two action scenes. It's the action scene on Svartalheim, and then it's the action scene in London. And I guess we can briefly talk about the whole fake out in Svartalheim,
yes,
where Loki pretends to betray Thor, but it is basically playing out Thor's plan, where they are trying to pull out the ether, destroy the ether, and destroy Malekith along with it. But I don't know about you, Chris, but I remember when this movie was being promoted, they showed that clip of Loki betraying Thor, and they cut the scene when Thor's hand gets chopped off. I don't know. I mean, what did you think about that whole, I guess, scene between Loki and Thor, and then the fact that we realized that it was a fake out to?
I liked that it was a fake out.
Yeah, so did I.
Just because now having what was it, 2 movies in of Loki knowing his nature of betraying Thor.
Yeah.
Me had I gone to this forgetting about that, I really would have thought oh, Loki's doing it again, and then you soon find out, hey, these brothers are actually on the same page, which is a cool moment given how Loki tried to potentially kill Thor a movie earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really liked the fake out. I mean, they fooled Jane. Clearly, they didn't
Yep.
tell her about it. So and it also goes references the losing hand or arm for all of Phase 2. Each movie does that. Like kind
Yes.
of Empire Strikes Back. So
Yeah. I
there's that
remember.
moment.
Yeah. What was the hand losing moment in Iron Man 3?
I think one of the suits lost an arm or something. Oh no. Killian. He cut off Killian's
Yes.
hand.
Yes. They did cut off Killian's hand. Yes, I do remember that now. Yep. Okay. What were the other ones? Guardians. Who lost a hand in Guardians?
Groot.
Oh, Groot. Yes, Groot lost a
Yeah.
hand in Guardians. In Cap 2, it's Winter Soldier,
It's got to be
Bucky.
Winter Soldier. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Bucky with it. And then that's it, right? After Guardians, there was what else
Age
was
of
there?
Ultron.
It's just Age of Ultron, and then Age of Ultron, he also loses the hand, or Claw loses his hand.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then Ant-Man. Ant-Man's
Yeah,
also phase two.
Ant-Man, yeah.
Who loses a hand in Ant-Man?
I think Yellow Jacket, the first thing to disappear when he shrinks is his arm.
Oh, okay. Interesting. All right. You can see we're just trying to digress by not talking about this movie, but
Yeah.
it's yeah, that it's a nice little theme that Feige had going on. I remember him talking about that.
Mhm.
So of course there's that whole fight, which is fine, I guess. It ended up his plan ended up not working out because the ether ends up not being destroyed, which is probably why Odin said it wasn't going to work in the first place. And yeah, of course Malekith escapes with all of that, but
Loki though.
But Loki gets killed, quote unquote. I mean, what did you think about this death scene? I think everyone basically believed that he did die
Yeah.
at this moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I liked it. At least thinking that he died because it was a sacrifice from Loki.
Yeah.
With Curse, I believe, is the essentially Malekith's henchman, was probably about to land the last blow on Thor, and then Loki coming in to essentially sacrifice himself for Thor. And then I thought it was good. I mean, from what I read, this scene was actually supposed to be Loki's death scene, and it didn't go over well in test screenings, and people really basically swayed the opinion. Like, they didn't believe that Loki was really dead, or they didn't like it, one or the other. And so Marvel's like, you know what, we'll take notes. We will have this as a fake out.
Wow. I mean, what do you prefer? Do you prefer that he dies in this movie, or do you prefer him dying when he does, I guess, later on?
I prefer him to die when he died in Infinity War.
Okay.
Hiddleston was just too good of an actor in this role for them to give up, or not give up, but basically kill off the character this early.
Yeah.
And they were still, you could tell there's still meat on the bone between at least Thor and Loki, let alone Loki. There's still enough meat on the bone with this character that you could do some things. So I like that they kept him around.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm of two minds on this. Like, I do think that like him not dying sort of negates the sacrifice that he makes in this one. Like, he's trying to show that he sacrificed himself for Thor. But on the flip side of it, I do agree with you that his character arc is more complete by the time it ends in Infinity War. And of course, we kind of see like a parallel character arc go on in the Loki series. But yeah, I can sort of see the argument for it on both ends. But it was definitely an interesting choice that they decided to keep him alive. But, if there is a character that they kept alive, Loki is one that actually makes sense to. Like, he's one that has faked his death multiple times. So,
Yep.
Yeah. The one thing that I didn't remember, though, I don't know about you, was how Loki actually convinced Odin, or like tricked Odin into actually getting him away. And I didn't realize that's because Loki convinces him that, like, oh, there was a body there and it was Loki's on the Dark World. Again, just goes to show you how little I remembered of this movie, but I don't know if you remember that at all.
No, I didn't until I watched the movie.
Yeah. So there's that. But that was that fight scene, and now there's the second fight scene, which is really the end of the movie, which is Thor fighting Malekith.
In London.
And I don't know if I ever told you, Chris, I actually went to visit that college in London. I've been there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll probably have to send you pictures after this at some point. I'll have to find them. But I did visit that college. I have a picture right in that sort of center, like, quad where Thor and Malekith fought. But yeah, they cleaned up the rubble there, guys. But I did go visit the battle scene. But yeah, what did you think of this fight scene overall, Chris?
It was whatever, I guess. I mean, it was fun. The convergence was lining up, so all the 7 realms, or whatever it was. Is it 7 or 9 realms? This just shows you how much I care.
The 9 realms, yeah.
Yeah, all the 9 realms were sort of lining up, so it was just kind of a little funny to see Malekith and Thor punching each other through different realms.
Yeah, I thought that was visually interesting, them punching each other through the realms. I will say, when they were doing that, I did also feel really bad for all of the cars that were getting destroyed. I'm like, man, rip to all those guys' cars.
Yeah.
But I will also say the one of the like bits that we got a little bit more at the end, which were more interesting, were Thor being in like sort of normal human situations. So like when he goes
Taking
to visit
the
them in the
tube.
apartment, yeah, taking the tube, for example, in the car with Jane. Like those are the few comedic moments that actually I thought really worked. And it's interesting because I feel like that I don't know if Taika really watched the prior Thor movies, but he definitely capitalized on that
Yeah.
aspect of Thor being in like normal human conditions in like the team Thor shorts for
Yeah.
sure, and in Thor Ragnarok in general. But yeah, I thought that that was like a little interesting bit. But yeah, I don't know, like it. This fight was just like it was just so generic. It was so uninteresting. This fight, like
Also, like a decent amount of it, or not decent, but like at least a part of it was just like red cloud of ether. It's like okay, red
yeah,
tornado. It's like okay, like
yeah, it was.
what is
I
this
would say
thing?
that the fight in the ether, like the right at the end where Thor comes in and like just defeats Malekith, like that was probably the least best looking part of the CG. But like even that was like fine, I guess. I don't know. I thought it was interesting that like their whole thought process to kill or to destroy Malekith was transporting different parts of him to different places. But
I
even then, I don't really understand how that separates him from the ether at the end there.
I don't understand how those teleportation rods or whatever you want to call them withstood the power of the ether when
Yeah,
he
I
was
don't
when
know
Thor was
either.
in the storm. But whatever, yeah,
I really don't know either. I mean, they were basically just giant nails. That's
yeah,
all they were.
yeah,
They were big physics nails. That's all they were.
yeah, yeah.
But in the end, Thor did really nail him.
Oh, got him.
Yeah, got
Um,
him. I was just my poor setup for that joke. But
yeah,
that's really it. I mean, that's they fight him. Thor saves London. I will say though, London in the MCU sort of gets like hammered twice. Once with this, and then the other time with Mysterio and all of his other drones. But
yeah. I mean, New York kind of gets.
I mean, New York is obviously worse. You can't compare. You can't compare the battle in New York to London. But yeah, that I mean, the only other thing at the end is that we realize that Loki is not in fact dead and that he's taken the place of Odin. And I will say, watching that scene, knowing that that is Loki, like the facial expressions and stuff you can see are really interesting because he's like so withholding of saying that he loves Thor or like that like calling him my son. And
Mhm.
when Thor mentions Loki, you can see him raise an eyebrow. So like in hindsight, it was I think kind of interesting the way that they shot
Mhm.
that. But I don't know about what you thought of that
His
scene.
posture too, like
Yeah,
Odin, quote unquote, Odin's posture too is very Loki like. So
yes,
they gave the hints.
they did give hints. They did give hints for sure. Uh, but and I mean, we can briefly talk about the post credit
Yeah,
scenes.
yeah. One,
What
there's
the
really
one?
only one important one.
Yeah, the only important one is that that Lady Sif and the other warrior, I'm forgetting
Volstagg.
his name, Volstagg, bring the ether, which is now the reality stone, to the collector, which was that was a cool cameo that we got, with the
Yes.
collector. But that's it. That's really it. I mean, we
Well,
briefly already mentioned that Thor comes back to see Jane, and that
yeah.
that wasn't really Jane; it was his wife, Chris Hemsworth's wife. But that
How?
is,
I
yeah.
don't
Go ahead.
understand how they extracted the ether from Malekith to get into that
That
container to hand to the
That's
collector.
what I was saying, man. I don't know how they separated it from him. Did they go to the
Yeah.
dark world and get it from him? Like, do you think like a ship crushing him would be enough to destroy him? I don't
Yeah.
know. But you know, that's. I mean, it happened. It
Yeah.
happened. But that's really Thor 2. Yeah. What a movie.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they also to just add on to the last point of that post credit. The collector does mention, like what was it, one down, five to go. So
Mm-hmm.
it shows that hey, there's somebody here collecting these things, which kind of
Yeah.
plants the seeds for later movies
I
of
will.
Thanos is collecting them too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I will also say, is this the first time that we've actually heard them referenced as Infinity Stones in the MCU? Because I think it is.
Did they mentioned the name Infinity Stone in this movie?
Yeah, they did. He calls them the Infinity Stones.
Odin?
No, no, no. The Collector. He said. I mean, they said that.
Oh,
No,
you're
no,
right.
sorry.
No, no, Volstagg is
Volstagg
right.
mentions them. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like the Tesseract is already on Asgard. It's not good to have two
Why is
Infinity
Infinity
Stones
Stones?
together. It's not
Yes.
wise to have two Infinity Stones together. So I think this is the first time they actually call them Infinity Stones.
Man, this is a all these firsts that are actually like sort of important stuff happen in this movie, which sucks because
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting that it is the first time that they called them Infinity Stones in
yeah,
this movie, and it's also interesting because they mention it. They sort of reference it earlier in the movie.
yeah,
I don't know if you remember where
yeah, I
they're
do.
doing like
Yeah,
that storybook.
yep. That's what I was thinking of. I was like, I don't think Odin called them Infinity
Yeah, yeah,
Stones.
yeah. But he did say that they were stones instead of, and this one was a liquid for some reason. I don't
Yeah.
know, but yeah,
Anyway, so
that is Thor 2. Chris, I guess we can just jump into the rating.
yeah,
What are you thinking here? I'm thinking this is gonna go high 5 for you, right?
yeah. Let me. This is such a. As you can tell, I'm so enthused about this movie.
I mean, aren't we all? I'm sure our listeners, I keep calling them viewers. This is not a visual podcast, but our listeners, I'm sure, are also very enthused by this.
Yeah, I'll go with a 2.75.
That is much higher than I expected
I
you to
was
give this
really gonna
movie.
go with the 2.5. I was like, now that we've been talking about, like, okay, there's some things in here that actually are important to the greater MCU. It's like, okay, I'll give
Okay,
it some extra points.
interesting. So you're rating this based on the importance to the MCU than the quality of the movie.
It's a mixture of both, but it got the extra points because of its importance.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm not going to spare it for any importance to the MCU whatsoever. I'm giving this one a very solid 2 out of 5. No quarter points. This is a 2 out of 5 for me
Wow,
very
even
firmly.
less than me.
Yes. Yeah. This movie is such a dull, boring movie. Like, I mean, the only reason that it's not getting anything lower is because there's a movie that exists called Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Like this movie is really just like, I mean, this there's a reason that this movie sat at the bottom of our MCU ranking for years and years and years. But
Yeah,
yeah, that is Thor 2. I apologize that this podcast is not as maybe exciting as maybe our past ones were to our listeners, but the good news is that now that we are through Thor 2, we can finally talk about one of the best freaking MCU movies ever, which is Captain America, the Winter Soldier, which will be our next episode. And I am so freaking excited for that one, Chris.
yes, me too.
Yeah. But do you have any final thoughts before we do our typical wrap up stuff here?
I do not, and why waste more time on this movie than we already have?
Yeah, no more time on this movie. But yes, if you liked what you listened to here, please feel free to rate and subscribe. Subscribe and rate our podcast on Apple Podcast, YouTube Music, or Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are the Ostrich Technique Podcast. And if you have any questions or want to further the conversation, please do reach out to us at our email address, which is ostrichtechnique@gmail.com. Like I mentioned, we will be back with our next episode, which is Captain America, the Winter Soldier. But until then, I am Ananth.
And I am Chris.
And we appreciate you listening. See ya.
Bye.